you can see all around you, right? We're looking at AI advancing at a crazy rate, and every single business is saying, oh, I'm going to use that to remove labor, right? That's the point. They're byproducts of trying to win more from doing that in this system ensures they lose it all. It's all concentrated in very few hands that essentially everybody else is told what to do in the worst slavery you could ever imagine. That's what a CBDC would look like around the world. The marginal cost of production of most things are going to move to free over time. But that's why prices of everything in relation to Bitcoin will fall forever.
2 cycles ago, we weren't worth mentioning by these people. Now they're declaring victory. That means we're like the resistance. Bitcoin isn't trusted money. It obviates the need for trust. It's like, we aren't playing your game, pal, and you just declared victory over a war, which we are not interested in playing. So you haven't seen the real threat of Bitcoin, which is to obviate the need for the entire competition you are trying to win.
What's up, Sats fans? Welcome to Swan Signal. My name is Sam Callahan. I am your host today. If you care about your financial future, you need to check out a couple of our offerings, including Swan IRA and Swan Private. Swan Private is our white glove concierge service where you get a trusted partner on your Bitcoin journey. We offer all kinds of education and research projects, as well as exclusive events to our Swan Private customers. Check it out today at swan.com/private. Also, Swan IRA. Swan IRA is the best way to gain exposure to real Bitcoin in a tax-advantaged account, like a traditional IRA, a Roth IRA, or rolling over your 401k. So if that interests you, check it out at swan.com/IRA today. We got a great show for you guys today. We got two excellent guests. We got Mr. Jeff Booth, who is the author of Price of Tomorrow. He's also a serial entrepreneur, technologist, and general partner at Ego Death Capital. And then we got Troy Cross. He's a man of many hats. He's an educator, philosopher, early Bitcoin miner, and a fellow at the Bitcoin Policy Institute. So both of you guys, welcome. Happy to have you here.
Thanks, Sam. Great to be here.
Thanks, Sam. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, so I thought we'd just have a conversation about a whole variety of things. I'm familiar with both of your guys' work, big fans. I thought we'd start with some recent news, and it was from General Manager of the Bank of International Settlements, Augustin Carstens. He claimed victory for fiat. He said the battle has been won. A technology doesn't make for trusted money. Only the legal, historical infrastructure behind central banks can give great credibility. And so, what do you guys make of these comments? This claim of victory for fiat from the central banker.
Well, when that happened, I noticed I couldn't make any more Bitcoin transactions.
It just stopped. Yeah, we should just
stop. Everything stopped.
We should just give up.
Yeah,
this whole idea.
Yeah. But I still can make Bitcoin transactions. I can make Lightning payments, and I have been nonstop, and that's accelerating. So I don't know if he might have a premature claim of victory.
Yeah. What about you, Troy?
Yeah, I had a bunch of thoughts actually when I heard that. One of which was like, oh, so they are fighting us, and they're admitting that it's a fight. Like, we weren't a contender. We weren't, 2 cycles ago, we weren't worth mentioning by these people. Now they're declaring victory. That means we're like the resistance, and we now have status. But another thing was, he put it in terms of trusted money. I kind of agree with him. Bitcoin isn't trusted money. It obviates the need for trust. It's like, we aren't playing your game, pal, and you just declared victory over a war, which we are not interested in playing. So you haven't seen the real threat of Bitcoin, which is to obviate the need for the entire competition you are trying to win. And the other thing is just kind of like, it's one of those, it's scared memes. The fact that he needs to declare victory reminded me of the mission accomplished George Bush trip to the middle, to the aircraft carrier. It's like, when you have to declare victory while nothing has really happened, that means you need to signal something. That says something about you and not about what's actually going on. And it's like, Bitcoin is just so happy to sit there in this kind of dormant phase, as it has done for much of its life, right? Just like, this is a bad comparison, but it's like one of these viruses that hides in your body and then comes out and attacks when your immune system is vulnerable. So
Yeah.
I
Rheumatoid
would be more
arthritis. There you
like,
go.
like it's more like just lying in wait, Bitcoin. Go ahead, it's your move. And when you start to abuse the printer, when you start to deny people the ability to make payments, like Bitcoin will be there to service them. It's the insurance policy against you. It doesn't go away. It just waits for you to make a mistake.
I love that. I love that, Troy. I like it just, and it just reinforces what most people in the existing system think is Bitcoin's priced in that existing system, and the truth is Bitcoin is repricing the entire existing system, and that transition is what we're dealing with, and that transition is open for any single person on the planet to move. And nobody can stop it. It's just literally impossible to stop. But it's repricing the existing system, not the other way around.
Yeah, those are good points. And I just think it's funny when they come out, it's some arbitrary, it's 14 years, uptime still 99.9%. All the fundamental metrics are up and to the right. And then they claim victory as fiat currencies are being debased at an increasingly rapid rate right now. It's kind of ironic. It's like they don't have any awareness about what's going on, or maybe they do, and they're just trying to paint this picture that things are rosy. But the other system continues to gain momentum, the system that we're all excited about today. And his comments were interesting, I think, when you think about the piece that you wrote, Jeff, a couple months ago, the Finding Signal in a Noisy World, brought up this idea that it's the first time we've had decentralization and a secure and decentralized network, and what that means. And he talks about how only a historical infrastructure built with laws and institutions can have credibility. But that's not necessarily the case now that Bitcoin exists, right?
Well, I think that's actually one of the things that so many people have a hard time understanding Bitcoin, especially if rule of law has, or a perception of rule of law has existed in your life. They in those regions, it would be harder to believe that in Bitcoin, because you could trust the financial institution, you could trust the institutions. There was rule of law to be able to protect you, but money is superordinate to rule of law. And if it wasn't, then you would expect where money was most broken, you'd have the best laws protecting people. And it looks exactly the inverse. And so what that says, and it's pretty obvious, what ends up happening with the corruption of money becomes corruption of laws, becomes corruption of the state, as everybody races in to be able to, and the money protects actually the people creating the laws, because if you have more money, you lobby and you get your politician elected to be able to control the next step, and laws change in favor of the people who have the money. And that's where we are in the world, and there's a lot of people who don't know that that's happening, and it's been happening for a long time. And the cascade of all of the chaos that's caused in the world is actually a cascade of that signal, that broken signal in money, corrupting a system. And there's people that believe that the laws can protect them from that, and the laws are designed to actually protect the abusers of money, not the other way around. And so what Bitcoin changes is it removes places like I wrote about, that we've never had decentralization and trust together, decentralization and security together. So we had to trust an institution instead. And we hoped that that institution would protect us from the very abuses that would happen. And it turns out that those institutions as well, because they need funding, are part of an infrastructure that requires. So if you have manipulation under that, if you have manipulation of money underneath the institutions, laws change over time and hurt individual people. This is the first time in history that we've had something different. That you could essentially obviate the need for that institution with the decentralization and security together and put us in control. But why it's so hard to see is we're used to trusting our bank. We're used to trusting somebody else to do that. We're used to trusting an institution isn't corrupt. And that change as they become more corrupt, becomes hard to see, and we're not used to trusting ourselves. So that's why self custody is hard for people. They think their bank is safer when their bank is not safe. And you think about regulation, right? Entire regulation sits on top. So you have regulation to protect your money on top of a system designed to steal your money. Right. And so how could that ever work?
Yeah.
Yeah, if I can just add something here, as a non-finance, and you have a background in finance, Sam. I do not, and so I had never heard of the Bank of International Settlements or this, Augustine guy. This was completely new to me, and one other kind of interesting thing that I think is going to occur to people uh, now is that there are these large centralized organizations that coordinate activity, uh, coordinate like well, what activity is unclear, but coordinate money somehow. Yeah, it's very. I don't want to sound like a conspiracy nut here, but who is the Bank of International Settlements, and why are they declaring victory? What war are they fighting? What standing do they have to fight that war? Right? Like no one elected them.
Nope.
They don't represent any particular country. Like, what the heck? So this is very, very weird. And like, they've been there all along. What have they been doing exactly? So from a pleb perspective, it just goes to what Jeff is saying. When we think of top-down centralized organizations, we think of the ones that we elected by voting, and we think of them as ultimately putting the rails on a system to protect consumers, borrowers, etc. But in fact, it's looking more like no, there's a monetary system with rules of its own, organizations of its own, and they are actually pulling some strings behind the organizations that we elected because there is some overlap there. Uh, and that's sort of unsettling from an outside perspective. Like once you're a Bitcoiner and you're well into the scene, you're like, yes, there's international money organizations and they don't like Bitcoin. But if you're just outside that scene, this is kind of like a wake up call. Like you didn't even know these organizations existed, let alone they were engaged in some kind of conflict. So again, I think it's kind of a self own on the part of the BIS. It's like, no, you should stay quiet. And do your thing, be very quiet. That's like the banker's way. You don't say you're fighting anything, you just pretend it's all part of just the norm. And I think for Bitcoiners now, we have the luxury of in some ways being quiet, right? Like, go ahead, you've won, okay, we lost,
Yeah.
let's just disappear for another couple of years. You'll hear from us at the halving, not from us. You'll just see NGU and be like, oh wait, I thought that was dead. And how many times has that happened, right? So we get to be the quiet, dormant phase power structure that is unseen, except it's not us in particular. It's just the natural forces of incentives. Right? So it's a weird reversal and a reveal of what's going on.
Yeah, Bank of International Settlements, I mean, they really do act above all sovereign governments. So and they manipulate the money as well. So when the money's manipulated and they're even acting above the laws, like you don't even have to change the laws because they're already acting above it. But Bitcoin, like Jeff was saying, there's this wheel of history that happens. Like think about Rome, obviously, is a good example of this, where it does just start to fall apart when the people start to revolt. And Bitcoin kind of breaks that wheel because it's never existed before. And that's what I loved about Jeff's piece. And so, Jeff, that piece again, the finding signal in a noisy world. What is the noise? Like, what do you characterize as the noise?
And that's actually why once you actually understand what's happening, you can tune out of all of that noise, and you have to think about. But I think about just really simply, money is information. And all it is information. It describes what you really want. You don't actually want more money. You think you want more money, but you're actually asking for more money to describe what you really want. And that might be more time with your family. That might be more love because you think that you abstract money. Having more money means other people will respect you more. It might mean a whole bunch of things, but you're actually taking the information that money is carrying to describe why you want the money. So if money is just information describing what you really want, and you have manipulation of information, so you have misinformation in money, then as a byproduct, in a world that's connected, especially around technology where it's connected at light speed, then you must have misinformation cascading everywhere in the world at light speed. And inside that, you will have these pockets of people believing one theory or believing another because they're all looking through that misinformation. And if I'm being in going down that rabbit hole and understanding that misinformation, then you have to put yourself inside that too. And you realize, okay, well, I might be suspect the same misinformation as well. And everybody that I'm talking to in Bitcoin might be suspect to that. So you have to do a lot of work to say, am I outside that misinformation? And you have to go down to a first principles level to understand why Bitcoin is different. And it actually is based on truth. It's based on hope. It's based on abundance. It's a different system outside of that existing system. Now, what I just said there is a hard thing to wrap your head around because we don't think of money as information. We don't think about that. We don't think we live on top of a broken system, and we experience the world. Our house goes up each year. We think about our family. We could get a better job. We could try to get a raise. We don't think about the plumbing underlying that system very often, and what that could mean, or that the information hierarchy in that money could break everything else. And so it unwinds a whole bunch of your when we talk about going down the rabbit hole, and why that's a tough thing for people, because they have to give up a whole bunch of former things they believed in to be able to understand what's happening. But once you're there and you realize the existing system that would spectacularly collapse globally without more misinformation and money, because the debt is unrepayable. $400 trillion of debt. If you paid back a debt $1 a second, it would take you 32,000 odd years to pay back 1 trillion. So 400 trillion it's already insolvent, right? It's already insolvent. So the only reason that everything exists today is because we grant authorities an ability to create misinformation and money, more manipulation of money. The only reason. And once you understand that, and you understand what Bitcoin will obviate the need to, and it'll transition a new system, then you realize the existing system is going to get a lot noisier. It has to, because it's at risk of something that offers better results to the planet and removing power from the people who control the existing system. It's at risk. So if that happened and you controlled all the strings of that existing system, whether it was you telling yourself, if you didn't do it, people would starve, or if you told yourself any sort of reason to be able to retain control of that, you can realize that there's, to Troy's point, there will be a fight against that system. And if Bitcoin could be stopped, then it would have already been stopped, because the existing system we live in is 10,000 times bigger than Bitcoin today. And Bitcoin is more decentralized, more secure today than it was last year, year before. Keeps getting, so it's moving, and that's why it transitions the world to this new path. And the view, I don't think about Bitcoin price going up, you know this, Sam, but I think about everything just because it should describe all other things inside the system, and it can't be manipulated. So it's all other things falling in price against Bitcoin over time.
Yeah. No, it makes a lot of sense. And you bring up, like, it requires more manipulation, more theft. I think you're referring to it requires more inflation, because it's a credit-based system. And if we don't get more inflation, if they don't keep stealing, then it collapses, right?
Yeah.
And so it leads to a bigger question, and I want to throw it to our philosopher here, Troy. Do you consider the traditional financial system unethical?
That's a great question. Um, I first of all, I just want to say to your listeners, if they haven't gotten this already, you got to read Jeff's essay,
Mm-hmm.
"Finding Signal in the Noise." It's a terrific essay. It made me think very hard and deeply, and also read his book, uh, Price It Tomorrow. Uh,
Oh yeah.
but uh, yeah, to Jeff's point, I'm an epistemologist. It's a study of knowledge, and this signal and noise is a lot like the traditional appearance reality distinction in philosophy, and so in so many cultures and so many philosophical traditions. Uh, and it's not just noise that's getting thrown up, but it's an alternate picture of what reality looks like that's getting thrown up, and that's where where the war is being waged is actually at the level of appearance. And uh, once you're it sounds cultish, but like once you are down the rabbit hole, once you have figured some things out, you see this gaping chasm between the reality and the appearance that's being constructed. I think, as Jeff is saying, that chasm is growing ever larger. The discrepancy between the appearance and the reality is it's increasing with time. So the big lie has to become even greater to cover that distance constantly. And there's tension, there's friction, right? And it's like a matter of time before the disconnect is so large that reality slaps you in the face, and you can't, it's something collapses, right? And at that point, as Jeff says, usually what happens is some kind of political revolution because the lie cannot be maintained, and usually a dictator comes to power or whatever, and you get a new system, you get a system change, right? um, and I think so. My problem is thinking through Jeff's lens. First and foremost, like it's epistemic and ethical. Uh, like we have to have a connection to the truth before we can even
Hmm.
start in with the ethical arguments. Like the truth almost precedes the good. Uh, uh, but also, yes, I think it's unethical, and I had this sense before I even found Bitcoin, and this is part of why I'm in Bitcoin. I taught at an elite university. I saw my students getting sucked into the world of finance, almost all of them, like were going into finance. And I was like, this is interesting. Why is this even happening? And that's what led me to read about money, try to figure out the nature of money itself. Once I realized how money was created, what money was, I mean, this is embarrassing to admit, but I mean, here I was, I had like a PhD and I'm doing really well in my field. I'm teaching at a great university. I didn't even know where money came from. I didn't know what it was, let alone like the ethics of its distribution. I don't think that's an accident. I don't, it's not like a, you know what I mean? It's not broadcast
Mm-hmm.
because if people actually understood it, they'd be like, what? uh, and yeah, I thought it was just in a way unfair, just unfair, simply unfair the way we create money. I don't think it's a fair system to create money through debt and through the Fed. I think it prefers the people who are closest to the money printer. It prefers the whoever gets a straw into the giant pipe of money, they profit, and that's why so much talent from my world was getting sucked into that world. And when it collapsed in 2008, you know, you saw that was in one of these moments where you did see the structure and everyone saw it because you saw what politicians rushed to rescue. You had Hank Paulson walking through the halls of Congress with a 2-page bill basically saying, give us money or everything ends. And it was like, what? How is that possible? How do you have that leverage? And what is the system such that everything ends unless these
Yeah.
people get their bonuses? It's like, what? So that sent me down the rabbit hole originally. That watching that whole system and that collapse, and that sent me to look at gold and e-gold actually. And when Bitcoin came along, and I found it in 2011, it was like, okay, this is ethical money, and our money is not ethical. And that was to your question, is their system unethical? Yes, it's unethical. Um, and I just wasn't aware that there was a better way, really. And
Hmm.
when I found Bitcoin, it was like this is the kind of money that could be, in principle, fair, and not perfect. When I say fair, I don't think that the distribution of Bitcoin is sort of like ideal. Uh, I I wish it were less concentrated. I'm glad that it's growingly less concentrated, but at least it doesn't accelerate inequality in its nature. At least it isn't false in its nature, right? So it's a sounder, more ethical money than what we have. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just want to pick up on what Troy just said really quickly, because to start something like this, it had to look like that. And because it operates exactly the opposite of our existing system, it decentralizes and it becomes broader over time. It's just a function of but not just it does that. Essentially, the over time, you can only gain more Bitcoin by creating value for others in
Yes.
their eyes, and that the value creators are enriched at the expense of hangers or value abstractors, right? Or just people that would take money from rent seekers, right? It works exactly the opposite. So as people create more and more value, that happens. But because it's tied to something that I wrote extensively about, that technology is deflationary, it means even if you're not a value deliverer, even if you don't, your prices still fall. So prices fall for you as well. So overall, the world heals as a result of this, and because it's exactly the opposite system. And you talked a little bit, Sam. If you think about where we are typically people will measure a really short instance of time and be in a local maximum and think their world is exactly going to look like that forever. And where we are in this transition, right? We can expect that the existing system, how do these reset over time? Going back to the Romans, they reset through world conflict. They reset through world conflict because it's way easier to believe once you have power in your own state, it's way easier to create an enemy outside your state to retain power and make them the evil enemy and get your people to follow along with that. And so our bias is to believe that. And what I would say with most Bitcoiners is they categorically deny it. Right? They step outside of that system, and they are. I have friends all over the world. I have friends in China. I have friends in El Salvador. I have friends in Turkey. I have friends all over the world. And you cannot get me to, because I know them personally. I know what it looks. I know how their families act. I know them personally. I am outside of that system, and so are they.
Can I just
Yeah.
add
Sure, go for it.
some specific ways in which I think money is unethical, as it is now? And one is just straight from Jeff's book, an observation that technology is deflationary. And if we had sound money, prices would be lower on everything across the board. Wages would be lower too. But wages are sticky to some degree, and we know that because it's part of how the Fed works. It's part of its dual mandate to keep unemployment low, basically by printing money so that people get wage cuts and don't realize it. That's kind of what's happened right now, right? If you haven't gotten a 10% raise in the last year, you've gotten a pay cut, even if your nominal wage is increased. So one of the kind of unethical ways is just simply that we would all have a lot more buying power, I think. Any savings we have has been devalued. And another way is that we have had massive malinvestment by virtue of a noisy monetary system. When everyone is guessing, I mean, this is just a view from the outside. Again, I'm not a finance person, but it just take the alien anthropologist view. You land on Earth and you're like, okay, everyone is talking about whether one particular person is going to make a decision about a particular rate. You know, that is a central banker. Like that's everything is hinging on that decision.
Yeah.
Like all sorts of other economic decisions about what to invest, how to spend. The whole economic machinery is like waiting for a pronouncement. Is that efficient? How could that be efficient? How could a well-designed economy depend on one person's decision like that? It just couldn't. So that inefficiency is sort of robbing all of us of better decisions being made throughout the system across the board and over time, because the uncertainty surrounding how that decision is going to be made, cascades out into people not taking the right kind of risks and taking the wrong kind of risks, and that's unethical, as well. Like, we fight over resources. That's what politics is, fighting over these limited resources. One of the things that I think about as a Bitcoiner is, what would abundance look like? Something you think about reading Jeff's book. And what does abundance look like, actually? And what does politics look like in a world of abundance? A world with a disciplined monetary base. You're still fighting over resources. Politics won't go away. Fighting won't go away. But it's very different when you live in an abundant world with fair money that puts a limit on certain kinds of theft, but also just provides cheaper goods and better allocation in the first place. Right? There's just less fighting when we live in a world of abundance.
Yeah.
But carry that forward, and these are really deep topics, that because if you're living in a system, you're measuring everything by that system, and that system is changing, you could expect to carry a whole bunch of the baggage from the previous system to the new system. It takes a really curious mind to actually go down to all of the things that actually do not exist anymore because of that existing system. Let's use what you said. Wages are sticky. Wages are sticky. The economists know, right, that's why inflation works. Essentially, you're paying people less all over the world to be able to transfer this money. If wages are sticky, and we know that, then yes, prices will fall. Yes, prices will fall, but wages will be sticky going the other way too. In other words,
That's
it'll
right.
be a massive transition of money back to the middle class and poor who are doing the work, out of the exact same function that we're told it works with economics. And another thing is the marginal cost of production the prices fall to the marginal cost of production. You can see all around you, right? We're looking at AI advancing at a crazy rate, and I described it in a book. And every single business is saying, "Oh, I'm going to use that to remove labor." Right? That's the point. And then and those people that are using it don't know that they're making it better and better and better through their use to remove them too. Right? That's the point. And if they keep doing that and prices have to rise, then they're byproducts of trying to win more from doing that in this system ensures they lose it all. It's all concentrated in very few hands, that essentially everybody else is told what to do in a kind of in the worst slavery you could ever imagine. That's what a CBDC would look like around the world. Now it would break long before that because people won't put up with it. They'll open up their eyes to this, and it'll drive adoption of Bitcoin. But the point is, on Bitcoin, prices fall to marginal cost of production. And marginal cost of production of most things are going to move to free over time. It might be a long time, but that's why prices of everything in relation to Bitcoin will fall forever.
Yeah, and it's real wages year over year are negative 22 consecutive months right now. So people's work, their wages are being stolen from them right before our eyes right now. So that inflation and that theft. And I think going back to Troy's point before and Jeff's point, um, Bitcoin continues to decentralize over time, the trend, whereas the other system continues to centralize over time. And it kind of gets scary when you think about where that system will go if it just continues to on the trajectory it is, where it continues to centralize. The Chinese Foreign Ministry came out with this release, and Luke Gromen talked about this, and it was titled "U.S. Hegemony and Its Perils." And I wanted to read a little quote from it. It said, "The United States exploits the world's wealth with the help of seigniorage. The hegemony of the US dollar is the main source of instability and uncertainty in the world economy. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the United States abused its global financial hegemony and injected trillions of dollars into the global market, leaving other countries, especially emerging economies, to pay the price." That's pretty strong words from a foreign superpower condemning the US dollar system. And it begs the system, and it might sound like hyperbole, but it seems like the current system, we're just headed towards war. Like it's heading us to these really bad outcomes. And I mean, do you guys think that's hyperbole, like Jeff or Troy? Like where the system is heading, it leads, it like highlights the stakes here. and why Bitcoin is so important that we educate people, because I just see where the system's taking us: more conflict, more inequality, and more revolution and things like this, which revolution isn't bad, but it could be really dangerous time as that change is happening for families and households. So what do you guys think about that idea? And do you think it kind of raises the question of how important of a mission that we're on right now?
So I absolutely think so. Over 3 years ago, in the book I talked about that's what would happen, right?
Mm.
You could predict the exponential increase in debt that had to come because the debt is rising at the rate, and now manipulation money is rising at the rate just to offset prices falling. Because if prices fall, if you had deflation from the existing system collapses. So there is no other way from the existing system to be able to pretend it's solvent rather than drive this manipulation at ever increasing rate. But that manipulation ever increasing rate destroys societies, destroys the bonds that hold us together and that trust. And while I agree with the Chinese foreign minister, what he said in that statement, it's kind of ironic that China's saying this, right?
Yeah.
Because all of this, if they actually believed that, they would be driving into Bitcoin.
Yeah.
This is all we believe. We believe our social structures, socialism, communism, capitalism, and everything else. We believe those structures because they're how we controlled people before, right? And we believed one system worked better and everything else. But under a manipulated money system, those systems look exactly the same. It's just it's who controls them. And there is no, how could you have a free market on manipulated money? How could you have a democracy, a thriving democracy, when you don't have a vote on your inflation rate, on how much money is manipulated? Yeah. So we have people on top of these systems that will go to war for those systems. And by the way, they'll be tricked into it. When I see most of people leaning into this politician or this state versus this state and everything else, I shudder. Because if you look at Lebanon today, I bet you most people in Lebanon, as you've just destroyed the currency and everything else, most people will forget and trust a new leader to do the exact same thing. They'll just transfer power to somebody else. And if you looked at Venezuela or if you looked at anywhere else, people believe that this solution can find a solution in a new person to be able to abstract the power from them, because that's what and they'll go to war believing that. So I very much worry about that, because it's and I agree with you as well. In fact, why I've spent personally more of my time and all of my time building this new system and being involved in with all Bitcoiners and building it and investing in it, is because the acceleration of this new system, so other people can see what it means to them personally, matters a lot. And so I could spend a bunch of my time yelling at the existing system, and by doing so, I would only make it stronger. Or I could spend all of my time influencing the new system, the new world I wanted to live in, and I could make that stronger. So I've essentially defunding the existing system with my actions, and funding the new system I want to see for my kids in the world with my actions.
Troy, do you have anything to add there?
It's hard to add to that. It's a wonderful sentiment, and I share that sentiment that Jeff just ended with. That our political discourse is so coarse and harsh, and now it's international as well, right? Whether we're headed for war or not, I don't know. I hope not, but it feels like it. I agree with you that it feels that way. Like, it feels like we're headed towards one or maybe two wars, or maybe they merge into one. And at what level that war is fought and how cold or how hot it is, I don't know. But is it fueled by the dollar? Yeah. Is the dollar part of the war? Yes. Uh, and do I agree with the statement about the global effects of manipulating U.S. money? Yes. I read this book recently called Treasury's War, in which
Hmm.
it's a former member of Treasury. Oh, you've read it.
Yeah, I've
One
read it
browsing.
actually.
So yeah, it's you get the view of the inside from a bureaucrat who's like, we are basically part of the military, and we're doing this awesome thing. We now have these amazing tools we didn't have, and people in North Korea are finally starting to say, "You're hurting us. You found out how to hurt us." Uh, it's so the the dollar system and the war system are intentionally being mixed because it's viewed as a non-violent alternative to war, to be able to use money rather than military force. Right. So yes, all this is happening, and at the same time, it's like, well, okay, what's the path out? How do we think hopefully, and how do we think in terms of action? What can we do about it? I can't talk down the Chinese government. I have no connection to other governments who are uh, involved in the conflict. But I think we can build an alternative system that offers our own kind of soft landing, uh, which is a neutral money that people can opt into that both takes down the temperature of the conflict and de-escalates some of the conflict because you're now on a neutral standard that's controlled by neither warring party, and also in some way provides just ordinary individuals another way to opt out. If Jeff's sentiment that he ended there were widely adopted and people started opting into a neutral system entirely, then that would not only de-escalate, but it would sort of limit the ability to ramp up for war, since we know wars are funded by printed money. So yeah, I wish I had something more profound to say. I defer on all of these questions to Matthew Pines, who has a lot more.
Yeah,
Another fellow
Matthew's
at the
great.
Bitcoin Policy Institute, who has a lot more informed and up to the minute sort of DC insider take on these things. Matt has been saying for a long time. I just have to give him credit. I mean, he called the conflict with Russia a long time before it happened over the Ukraine. He called the invasion of the Ukraine, right? And for a long time now, he's been saying people aren't taking seriously enough the tension with China and the possibility of war, and the sort of what practical need for us to kind of hit the rewind button on globalization and onshore uh, onshore our own economic activity is whenever and wherever we can reduce these chains of dependency, because it's like war is on the calendar and the only question is when does it happen, not whether it happens, but like when does it happen and what does it look like, uh, and that's that's scary, and I don't know what to do about it except try to build a more hopeful and abundant world.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, Jeff, you got anything to add there?
I just when you think about kind of that action, and so that'll come down to what Matthew would talk about or have done lots of work on. It'll come down to energy and food security ultimately, which nations will do better and everything else, and China is in very big danger right now. So if you look at the shipping fleet, the U.S. military shipping fleet, what that looks like if you have any breaks in these chains for food security and energy security for China against a currency that is not the dominant currency, and a pile of debt that is unrepayable in China, and demographics that add to that. China is in a world of hurt. Now, typically when countries are in a world of hurt like that, they will lash out to try to create. So one of the things we're talking about right now is what are the next steps and why war or increasing proxy wars are likely, and where are areas of safety. I'm abstracting to a different level. I'm abstracting to how do you protect yourself and how do you influence the world that you want to see. The only way I've found is through Bitcoin. Because if more and more people, if we get 1 billion people in Bitcoin, that essentially they have immunity from their governments on this, immunity from their governments on financial repression, immunity from their governments on I'm going to pay these people in the Congo way less so I can steal the resources to fund my battery production. Right?
Yeah.
Because I have the money to be able to do that, and I can revalue their currency, and they can go into, I can put a dictator in control there, so I can rob them blind. What you'll see at a different level is global trade, and is people to people all over the world, and people providing value to people. Now Bitcoin is early in this, but more and more people are going to take themselves out of that existing system and have immunity from that existing system, using them as a leverage point against other people. And so when I think about why we funded FEDI, or what I think about Fediment on top of this layer. And if you know Obi, Troy knows Obi, and the team there. And if I see what's coming there, to be able to central bankers and the likes are trying to attack Bitcoin, which is going to be impossible, or Lightning, which is going to be impossible, and they don't even see what's coming, to being able to drive massive global adoption at the same time where more people need it badly. So that is the race. That is the race. How many people can you save that are starting to see this? And as those people that are starting to see this and actually transact in a system of truth, hope, and abundance, how many of those people are not tricked by the existing system to be able to, because they're reliant on the existing system. And just ask yourself what the politics would look like today. If somebody came to you and said, "Listen, your real wage is going to go up next year, but your income is going to come down, and prices are going to fall faster. I want your vote." Like, good luck, right? So when we laugh at that, when we laugh at that, but it's such an interesting thing, because if we're laughing at that, we know for sure that the global population will not vote for a world where prices fall. We know all over the world they'll be tricked into it because they're self-interested. They think they're actually solving a problem for themselves, and they're actually creating more pain for themselves. But in our human nature, we will want to believe that lie. And so all of the people trying to make more money in this existing system, trying to drive this system, are doing the same thing, and they're making it worse and worse and worse, telling them the same lie, that it won't hurt me. I can get out before it hurts everybody else. I can park my money somewhere else. And yes, the world's going to go to chaos, but I'm safe and out of the exact same system.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't bring it up to be a downer here. It's more like I look at this current system and it just seems unsavable, unsustainable. The math doesn't make sense, which will require more inflation and lead us to paths like perhaps a war, which is inflationary in itself if supply chains start to break down. And then you just get this downward spiral, this loop. And so I do see Bitcoin as, I mean, Troy, you're a pianist. I see Bitcoin as this metronome of truth every 10 minutes in this world that has become one big cacophony. And you wrote this thread that I thought was amazing. It's the once they see thread. That's what I called it. And I joked that it sounded like a speech from Martin Luther King Jr. or something. But basically, the premise of the thread is, right now, people simply are not appreciating all the benefits that Bitcoin can bring the world. And that's why people like us are around educating. So, Troy, like, how do we get people to see it? Because I think both of you guys actually do a wonderful job of telling your arguments in a way that's accessible to people that aren't confrontational. And so, do you have any tips? Like, how do we get people to see it? Because I think truth is on our side, and Bitcoin's this amazing thing that can bring all these benefits to the world. But how do we get people to see it?
That's a really hard question, because I think right now we've gotten some people to see it, and
Yep.
they are, they're thrilled with what they see, and we've built an incredible worldwide community of Bitcoiners, and it is growing. But we are also hitting serious points of resistance, and some of this is the system fighting back, and we're dealing with we basically have the system has standing in every possible way. Like every structure of epistemic authority is working to the system's advantage. And that includes academia pretty much across the board. That includes media, the major media outlets, the Guardian, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal. It includes government. Now, we have, I think, more of a voice in government than we do in media or in academia. But what you realize, especially in Bitcoin, is that these structures of epistemic authority, uh, they settle which questions are askable, which thoughts are thinkable. Right? They frame a discussion. They don't weigh in on a discussion. They decide which discussions are worth having and which are not. And for a lot of these structures, they've made Bitcoin fringe and beyond the realm of reasonable opinion. So it's not something that's even, it's not, like the what Bitcoin could do. Which, by the way, I wrote that thread, just started with like one tweet, and then I just kept rolling with it. It just was going to be one tweet, but it was like, no, there's so much more that when people see it, when people finally see it and the scales fall from the eyes, like the resistance to Bitcoin is just going to disappear. And because it does so many things for our energy system, for our economy. In particular, I was thinking about energy and the environment in that thread.
Yeah.
And why is it so hard? It's so hard because all of these structures are working against us, but even putting it like that isn't right. They're working to make it such that the discussion can't even happen. You're written off before it even happens. And so when I talk to people about Bitcoin in my world, they're like, when they hear that I'm thinking about Bitcoin or working on it, they're like, oh, they immediately assume that I'm arguing that it's a threat to civilization or something, right? They immediately assume that I'm arguing that it's a bad thing, because I'm a decent person and they know me. So how can I possibly be taking up the other side, right? That just tells me that the frame has been set, and that's a really difficult thing to get behind. I like Jeff's book in a way because like it doesn't mention Bitcoin till the end.
Yeah.
So Jeff's secret is like just talk about the system that we're living in and technology and ask this simple question about why aren't things getting cheaper. And Bitcoin is like just this tidbit at the end, right? If you lead with Bitcoin, like it doesn't go very well. But for me too, on the energy side, I lead with like, why do you think we're we're having a hard time deploying solar, for instance? Why is it that even though we have this technology that produces electricity at this incredibly cheap price in some locales, in Australia and Morocco, when it's sunny, solar produces like the cheapest flow of electricity of any technology, and yet we have serious difficulties with the transition. I was talking to someone in Ireland. He was like, the typical wait to get grid connected is 8 years in Ireland. It's like 4 or 5 years in the U.S. Uh, we have 80% of all the proposed solar and wind projects are abandoned in this country, in the U.S. Right? We, we having problems financing these operations. You push into that, first of all, like what's the problem with the transition we have here? Don't mention Bitcoin at all. It's like talk about flexibility, flexible demand, the need for flexible demand. Everybody's still on board. Then you're like, oh, you know what? There's computing that's flexible, uh, like AI, which is growing very fast right now, very rapidly. Uh, some tasks for AI can be done whenever and wherever. They don't have to be done at a particular time at a particular server location. So flexible compute could be used to help balance grids. It could be used to help finance the build out of new renewables, because it could happen behind the meter. Uh, some of this flexible compute, people are, yeah, everybody's on board. The word Bitcoin comes up, and the conversation changes, and it's like, oh no, not Bitcoin, right? But then you're like, oh, at that point, you've already laid the foundation. What's the problem in the first place? How is it fixed? And then Bitcoin is just another instance of the kind of category of flexible compute that fixes it. People start start to get it. And I've actually seen and talked to people where I've watched the lights switch flip, where they see that, oh, actually, yeah, Bitcoin could consume power when and where it's very cheap, and that could help us solve our problems. But those conversations always started with the problems uh, rather than Bitcoin. But to some extent, I want to go back to something Jeff said earlier. Uh, you're you're going to get resistance uh, because the system is fighting you, and it's going to be hard to project signal through the noise. And when I'm discouraged about that, I'm reminded of just Jeff's earlier point. We just build it. The people who need it will use it, and the more we build, the more there will be to write and talk about. People like stories. Number one is like people connect with stories, real concrete instances, not facts and figures, not abstractions. I'm a philosopher. We deal in abstract arguments. Uh, but people don't connect with abstract arguments. They connect with stories. But like something like the gridless stories, we have
Yeah.
the general idea, which Brandon Quittem, nicely spells out as a pioneer species. Bitcoin as a pioneer species. It goes into a new location where there isn't energy. We develop energy resources in that location where there are natural resources, whether it's wind, water, whatever, stranded gas. Bitcoin provides a kind of anchor, a lichen to grow in that environment, and then an economy builds up around it. As a philosopher, I'm completely taken with this abstract story, but most people are not. What they're taken with is the actual story of people's lives being transformed when they get energy, when they didn't have energy. And companies like Gridless are actually doing that. We tell that story, we show how people's lives are being changed. Wow, that's different. And same for Bitcoin as a whole, where people need Bitcoin and are using it. You don't have to convince them of the value. Uh, in Lebanon, people are mining Bitcoin, right? In an inefficient ways, not in the best ways, because the banks are closed. People are burning banks and mining Bitcoin, and you don't have to tell anyone in Lebanon or in Turkey, for instance, why Bitcoin is valuable and have to try to convince them because the system is just broken. So while of course my aim is to try to persuade people with an open mind to look into what Bitcoin can do, there is a part of me that thinks many people who are already served well by the system and who are thoroughly thinking in terms of the system won't see it. The people who see it are the people for whom the current system is breaking, like
Yeah.
people in Turkey and in Lebanon, and on the energy front as well. It's only like uh, people sitting on tons of stranded energy, which they are now curtailing, you know, negative energy pricing, people who can't get any money for their wind farm, and the deals are falling through. Those people are desperate for a buyer of energy, and they'll see. It's like they'll see Bitcoin and latch onto it. I am a word guy, despite the fact that I feel very nonverbal this morning. I deal in the realm of thoughts and words, right? And uh, and so I'm trying to persuade, or at least not persuade isn't even really what I think it is. It's more like just open people's minds to see things. And I of course I think that's valuable and it's necessary. But ultimately, the market
People,
forces at work
yeah.
are so much more powerful. It's like we're losing the word game badly. We're getting spanked in the word game, you know, and that's because we don't have any of the megaphones of we don't have any of the megaphones. But it's like at the same time we're crushing it. I feel like at the level of incentives, especially on the energy front, and this is going to be how it goes. Like I just got a preprint of a paper. A lot of it's based on my tweets, actually. This is amazing. A group out of UCL, University College London, and Germany. Uh, they've got a preprint. Let's see. The title is "Can Bitcoin Stop Climate Change? Proof of Work, Energy Consumption, and Carbon Footprint." SOK, a State of Knowledge paper. Uh, I'll, I'll give you the last line of the abstract. We find that a net decarbonizing effect led by renewable based mining is indeed plausible. Right? So here's a University College London
Yeah.
research team, also somebody who works with wind farms in Germany. And this is just the first paper. I've talked to this group. They've got more on the way. They're writing up their results. It's going to happen. We're building I think of this in terms of layers of a stack. The base layer of the word war is academia and peer-reviewed studies in scientific journals. We are way behind on that one, but it's going to follow the actual progress of miners on the ground. And then we have things like, Bitcoin Policy Institute.
And the
We have
people,
things
yeah,
like
the
Swan.
people who need it are going to be adopting it first.
Exactly.
And
We're
we're
going
just
to
here to build
follow.
it. Yeah. And then,
We're here to
that's
tell the
why,
stories of what's already happening, right?
yeah.
The base layer is going to be written after the stuff is being built. Academia will follow industry. The policy institutes, the swans of the world are going to talk about what's actually happening, the people whose lives are actually transformed, the industries that are actually transformed. And I think we just have to be okay with that,
Yeah.
following rather than the words following the reality. In fact, I
Well,
think it's appropriate for
That's what
Bitcoin.
Jeff's doing over at Ego Death Capital now, right? So you're
Exactly.
Bitcoin focused venture fund building. You've one of your portfolio companies works in the energy, right? Sonota.
Yep.
So why did you decide to start the fund, Jeff? I mean, was it part of this idea just you wanted to build?
Yeah, I wanted to spend, so I saw what was happening here. So Bitcoin for a long time, and I think even today, it's hard to understand because it's more like a protocol than a company, right? It's an open, decentralized protocol than a company, and that base layer, being Bitcoin, the asset, um, it, uh, if you just describe that as a new internet being built, the new internet, peer-to-peer internet, is going to be built on incorruptible money, decentralized, secure, incorruptible money. But 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 why it could do nothing else for a long time is it had to it had to be protected against everything. Everything would come at it. If it would fail, then you couldn't build everything on top of it. But why it would be really difficult for the world to see, and most people are still, I would say 99% of the world, when they think about Bitcoin, is they still think about Bitcoin as that, right? They don't see Lightning Network that's transporting value all around the world and how fast that's growing. They certainly don't see what's going to happen with Fediment and what's going to happen there. So they're looking at previous layers still being in this bun fight of the existing system, kind of driving their knowledge base to what Troy just said about the frame of reference. Is it crazy? Is it absolutely crazy that our frame of reference is what rate of inflation should there be, right? Rather
Yeah, it's
than
crazy.
should there be inflation, right?
The
Should,
rate of theft.
because just change rate of inflation to rate of theft, and everybody all over the world, the entire political machinery, education machinery is talking about the rate of theft. And then you just ask yourself, if people believed that theft was required for a productive economy, who would win? What would the mere reflection of the world look like if there was a broad belief in society that theft was required to live in a productive world? It's just insane that nobody asked that question. So for me, the big, so I'll get to the why ego death and why I decided. That was the first big question. And then when I saw all my friends and everything else, and kind of my personal thing is, I actually hope people don't say Jeff orange pilled me. I hope they find it on their own, because it's actually more real on their own. I hope I inspire a conversation where there was a pattern interrupt, like how is it possible that technology is driving deflation and we live in an inflationary world? It creates a pattern interrupt that creates an incongruence in your brain that you have to investigate, right? So what typically when you do that is you ask somebody else their big problem, the problem they're dealing with, and then you ask 5 whys on how they're going to solve their problem from their existing experience. And what you'll see is, on the bottom of all those problems, they're unsolvable by the existing system that they live in. And as they get to that next why, okay, solve that one for me. And okay, then how does that work? They'll get to a point and go, and start to understand and start to look for
Yeah.
something different. And so when I realized that then, okay, Bitcoin was at this transition, and yes, the asset is fantastic. That's going to be my savings technology. I'm going to use that. And then, but when Lightning is emerging and Taproot's coming and everything else, I realized there was a time and place that now you could start to create incredible value for people, where the plumbing that we talk about all the time moves to the background, and people are experiencing value, and that value is going to explode, and they're going to be using the system without even really knowing they're using the system, because it provides so much value to their life. And I wanted to be a part of that. I wanted to be a part of, and when I say a part, um, I'm not the hero in this story. The entrepreneurs that are building the technologists and the entrepreneurs that are building inside this, like, I just can't believe I get to be around those people that are creating this vision of the future. I just can't, like, I want to be around it all the time. So it was more, it was more selfish. I wanted to be around the system, and I can't believe I get to. I cannot believe I get to these conversations. I consider you guys really good friends. I cannot believe all of the incredible people I get to meet in this community.
Amen. Amen, brother. I always think of the shadowy super coders, like building too, the core developers and those guys and girls. You know, they're some of the heroes in this story. And I know you guys have been generous with your time. I really have just one more topic or question. You know, Gary Gensler came out with some choice words yesterday. Everything other than Bitcoin, you can find a website, you can find a group of entrepreneurs, legal entities, yada yada yada. You know, Bitcoin is unique. Um, and Jeff, you were just mentioning, you know, Bitcoin is the base layer is hardened and is ossifying, and it is kind of withstood a lot of attacks, and now we're starting to see layers built on top of it with other applications, like you said, that are providing more value. All these other projects seem to be built on quickstand, and I'm just wondering, like even yesterday, Solana froze for the, like, I don't know how many times it stopped and unplugged and plugged back on, and then you go on their website and in big letters it says decentralization, a website that they created. I mean, I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. And I guess, do you guys even worry about other
All,
cryptocurrencies? Do you think
all
it's
goes,
important to call them out at all,
all,
or just ignore them completely?
it all goes to zero. It all goes to zero. And just the economic rationale alone ensures it goes to zero. Because why would you do something on an alternative chain that was centralized? How could you have decentralized finance on a centralized chain? Like, it's just the oxymorons in this. But I get it. If somebody is able to dump their bag on somebody else and try to and create a whole bunch of marketing to try to convince other people, I also get it. A whole bunch of entrepreneurs inside a space that they thought they were building value in NFTs or game tokens or anything else. And once they've raised money from other people and their friends and family to build value, what would be more likely? I was wrong. I'm going to port it all over here. Or I need to get out quick. I need to keep going to get out. What's more likely? What would you do? And what would most people do? And most people, so you can just see where that whole ecosystem is as a result of human action. And so for me, okay, you do you.
Yeah.
But it tells me, I go, I cannot believe there's not more competitors. There's some other really great venture funds and everything else. I cannot believe there's not a wall of money coming into this space, because it's mispricing everything else badly.
Yeah. Troy,
Yeah.
we got any?
Yeah. Well, what I said about earlier about the epistemic structures uh, being controlled by fiat. What crypto tried to do, in a way, was to capture those same structures, and they did it with spending a tremendous amount of money on um, ads and lobbying and entwining themselves with that system. Sam Bankman-Fried most of all, and emulating it, really. and they reap the rewards of that in the sense that they got inside the consciousness of not only a lot of investors, or ordinary retail investors, but also some institutional money. Academia certainly is filled with crypto uh, builders, advocates, and so on. Like academic institutions are filled with it, right? And it's like recently the reality has been sort of catching up with the appearances, and we are starting to see, I think, Bitcoin shine against its competitors in its kind of unique ways. And yeah, Bitcoin precisely never made those compromises. It couldn't, because it's not like it made a choice. It couldn't because there's no Bitcoin company, there's no Bitcoin CEO. And the flaw of Bitcoin, of sort of not having a marketing department, was also its saving grace, because it never compromised itself, never centralized and was subject to these forces, right? So we're sort of playing the long game. We've been playing the long game all along. My own stance towards all of these alternative cryptocurrencies is just to ignore them. I actually take no stance at all on what will happen with their prices. I'm not a maximalist in the sense that I don't make predictions about dominance or anything of the sort. I just don't see them as ethical money. I don't see them as anything revolutionary and new like Bitcoin. And I don't see them as worth my time. Like, I'm a philosopher. Why am I in Bitcoin at all? It is because I see a possibility here to make the world a better place and to be a part of it. And I do get opportunities to meet and hang out with people like you and work also with companies that Jeff works with. It's an incredible privilege. I would not do that if it were a short-term game to enrich myself and others. I would still be doing philosophy. I made that choice 30 years ago when I decided to become a philosopher, right? What's weird for me is Bitcoin is actually a realm in which I can do philosophy and be a philosopher. This conversation we've had is extremely philosophical. Jeff's book is philosophical, right? It's like a venue in which you can think about what's good in life and what's worth pursuing and how to build a fair, just, hopeful, abundant future, right? That I don't get from anything else but Bitcoin, not even close.
Yeah.
Bitcoin's the only one that gives me that opportunity, and that's why I'm in it.
Yeah, Bitcoin's to me, Bitcoin's the only one that's censorship resistant, secure, and decentralized. And that's why it's the only one that I think has any kind of chance of being successful. And honestly, there's so much going on in Bitcoin. Like, I can't even keep track of everything that's going on in Bitcoin. I don't have the time to focus on any other cryptocurrencies. And so, I think that's a great place to end it. And I just really appreciated this conversation. Thanks for coming on, guys. Why don't we end with just where people can find information about whether what you're working on or your own personal, publications or work. Troy, where can people find you?
I think still best is Twitter. Hopefully, I'll be porting people over to Nostr soon. I am there at Nostr as well, but
Yeah.
Twitter is probably the easiest place to find me. At the Trocro, TheTrocro.
I'm spending way more time on Nostr, just for the same reason I'm spending more time or all my time with Bitcoin. I'm trying to purposely live in the world I want to see, and so Nostr would be the place to find me. And to find my my public key, if you just went to Jeff Booth at jeffbooth.ca is what my website.
Yeah. I would recommend going to Nostr too. Everyone's listening. It's not that hard. You can do it. I promise. Go to Damus. You can set up your own account, and it's really, really cool. And then one more shout out to Jeff's book, Price It Tomorrow. It is the first book that I send to people when they're interested in Bitcoin. It might surprise people because, like Troy said, Bitcoin isn't mentioned that much, but you have to understand the problem to understand the solution. So thank you guys so much for coming on the show. Appreciate both of you so much, and I'll see you around. See you around soon.
Sounds great, buddy.
Thanks, Sam.
If you care about your financial future, you need to check out a couple of our offerings, including Swan IRA and Swan Private. Swan Private is our white glove concierge service where you get a trusted partner on your Bitcoin journey. We offer all kinds of education and research projects, as well as exclusive events to our Swan Private customers. Check it out today at swan.com/private. Also, Swan IRA. Swan IRA is the best way to gain exposure to real Bitcoin in a tax-advantaged account, like a traditional IRA, a Roth IRA, or rolling over your 401k. So if that interests you, check it out at swan.com/IRA today.